Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the synthesis of yoga with our beloved Ranga. We are in the Yoga of Divine Works, page 94, beginning with the words, "The greatest gospel of spiritual works ever yet given to the race."
The greatest gospel of spiritual works ever yet given to the race, the most perfect system of karma yoga known to man in the past, is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. In that famous episode of the Mahabharata, the great basic lines of karma yoga are laid down for all time with an incomparable mastery and the infallible eye of an assured experience. It is true that the path alone, as the ancients saw it, is worked out fully. The perfect fulfillment, the highest secret, is hinted rather than developed. It is kept back as an unexpressed part of a supreme mystery. There are obvious reasons for this reticence. For the fulfillment is in any case a matter for experience, and no teaching can express it. It cannot be described in a way that can really be understood by a mind that has not the effulgent transmuting experience. And for the soul that has passed the shining portals and stands in the blaze of the inner light, all mental and verbal description is as poor as is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. All divine consummations have perforce to be figured by us in the inapt and deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of mental man. So expressed, they can be rightly understood only by those who already know and, knowing, are able to give these poor external terms a changed, inner and transfigured sense. As the Vedic as the Vedic rishis insisted in the beginning, the words of the supreme wisdom are expressive only to those who are already of the wise. The Gita, at its cryptic close, may seem by its silence to stop short of that solution for which we are seeking. It pauses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light. And yet, its secret of dynamic and not only static identity with the inner presence, its highest mystery of absolute surrender to the divine guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature, is the central secret. This surrender is the indispensable means of the supramental change, and again, it is through the supramental change that the dynamic identity becomes possible. So, he is very clear in what he is saying, but little guarded, so we'll see what he is meaning. Okay. The greatest gospel of spiritual works, he is speaking of karma yoga. Okay, so the karma yoga as expressed best is found in the Gita. Okay. Of spiritual works ever yet given to the race, the most perfect system of karma yoga known to man in the past is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. So there are many who confuse the Bhagavad Gita as only a teaching of karma yoga. In the essay on the Gita, he has pointed that out. That it's not only karma yoga, but it's also bhakti yoga and also jnana yoga. They tell you even the Gita tells you how to sit, how to keep your body straight. It goes into such detail. Okay? And then what to do with the mind. So it is like Jnana Yoga path, it's also the Bhakti Yoga path, because he brings in the idea of the personal Lord, the personal divine. First of all, you get the impersonal aspect, and then you get the personal aspect at the third level. So the Gita is a synthesis. But here he is speaking only of Karma Yoga because that's a chapter. Okay, so Karma Yoga is to be found in the Gita. In that famous episode of the Mahabharata, the great basic lines of Karma Yoga are laid down for all time with an incomparable mastery and the infallible eye of an assured experience. Note the phrase for all time. The truths revealed there are eternal truths. And we have a word for that in our Indian culture. We say Sanatana Dharma. It's not something that goes on changing. In many other religions, there are concepts which change. Okay, for instance, in Christianity, first there was the belief in rebirth. Then they abolished that. So things change, do change. And there are other comments that come up and things change. But here he's saying for all time. In other words, it is true in every country, everywhere, at any time. So it is something fundamentally true. Okay, so is to be found in the Bhagavad Gita. In that famous episode of the Mahabharata, the episode just before the Kurukshetra war, Arjuna suddenly says, "Take me to the middle of the battlefield, I want to see whom I have to fight." And then when he goes there, and he knew whom he is going to fight, but when he actually sees his grandfather, his cousins, his even brother without his knowledge, Karna is there on the other side, he feels frightened and then he collapses. He says, "No, I can't fight." So that's the scene that he's talking about. Okay. Famous episode of the Mahabharata. The great lines of Karma Yoga are laid down for all time with an incomparable mastery and the infallible eye of an assured experience. It is true that the path alone, he's referring to the Karma Yoga, as the ancients saw it, is worked out fully. How to do the Karma Yoga is worked out fully. But the perfect fulfillment, the highest secret, is hinted rather than developed. So there is a footnote for that. Okay, the highest secret. And so he is just giving the words used in the Gita. Rahasyam Uttamam. Rahasyam is secret and Uttamam is the highest. So he saying it's only hinted but not given. And what is that? He's talking of the supramental fulfillment. It doesn't go to the supramental fulfillment, the Gita. It just gives a hint. And the hint is the Purushottama. Because the Purushottama is at that highest level. Uttama Purusha. But Sri Aurobindo wants the descent and into the evolution which the Gita does not speak about. Probably because the idea of evolution was there in India. The Dashavatar is a clear sign of the evolution. But it wasn't spelt out in detail and it wasn't the inner workings and all that was not given specifically. So that only Sri Aurobindo can bring out now because it's openly available in the scientific evolution. The scientific evolution is very, very clearly enunciated 100 years ago. So Sri Aurobindo could now shift the biological evolution to an evolution of consciousness. So that the Gita does not develop the idea. And he's also saying why. Okay, that's interesting. We'll have a look at that. He's saying the perfect fulfillment, the highest secret is hinted rather than developed. It is kept back as an unexpressed part of a supreme mystery. He's again using the word supreme mystery, highest secret, because the Gita itself speaks of the Uttamam Rahasyam, the highest secret. But it's a secret left for individuals to find out, probably. There are obvious reasons for this reticence. Reticence, unwillingness to speak. Brief talk, not in detail. Na? So reticence. For the fulfillment is in any case a matter for experience, and no teaching can express it. The higher truths, language cannot, it is beyond language. So that's why probably they did not even speak about it. That's what he's saying. It cannot be described in a way that can really be understood by a mind that has not the effulgent transmuting experience. So, someone who has not had the experience will not know what is being spoken of. In fact, this was the problem with the Vedas, because the Vedas are speaking of Saraswati, they are speaking of Varuna. Now, what does Varuna represent in spiritual experience? So, Sri because he has had spiritual experience, and the description given for Varuna in, so this is the cosmic consciousness, this is the intuition in the mind, this is the discrimination in the mind. He can make out which god represents what, because he has had experience. If you don't have experience, you don't know what they're talking about.
But Arjuna, being representative of common man, says, don't give me mangled theories.
Yes, that's right. So, that's what you say. It cannot be described in a way that can really be understood by mind that has not the effulgent transmuting experience. Effulgent, full of light. Okay, so, and for the soul that has passed the shining portals and stands in the blaze of the inner light, all mental and verbal description is as poor as it is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. He's going to the extent of saying it's impertinent. Okay, so what does he mean by shining portals? To a normal man, probably it would mean the higher mind. To a normal mind. But for those who are following Sri Aurobindo, you can say that the shining portal is the overmind. That's a door from which the supermind is available.
Yes.
So the shining portals. And it is shining, mind you. It's a golden lid, and it is semi-translucent. So it's a shining portal. That word seems to be quite clear. And stands in the blaze of the inner light. All mental and verbal description is as poor as it is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. Now, this is a very interesting, and I will supplement it with another image in the Gita itself. Okay, he says that a man who is thirsty needs a well full of water. A man who is thirsty for knowledge needs the scriptures. That's a comparison. But when there is flood everywhere, the man doesn't need a well. And when the man is full of knowledge, flooded with knowledge, he doesn't need the scriptures. In the Gita, that's the image given. So that's the reflection of that is also here. So he's saying.
So what would you understand by all mental and verbal description?
Yes, through words. Because if you remember, the spiritual truths above the mind are ineffable. They can't be put into words.
So even verbal.
Yes. Ineffable means you cannot put it into verbal form.
Yeah.
And Sri Aurobindo says that in the Life Divine also, that yes, it is ineffable, it cannot be put into verbal form, yet we'll try to get some idea, some vague idea, at least a shadow you can form when he's describing the supermind. So, it's an attempt that has to be made, but that's why the Gita did not speak too much about the Purushottama. That's what he's saying. Leave it to the experience. Okay, so in fact, one of the Upanishads also says that when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, the mind comes back without grasping the truth. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. So that means to say, the mind goes up, but the mind is unable to grasp that. It has to come back disappointed. Because then another, not mental consciousness, but Soul consciousness can realize the truth, not the mental consciousness, limited only to this field. Okay, so and for the soul that has passed the shining portals and stands in the blaze of the inner light, all mental and verbal description is as poor as it is superfluous, inadequate, and an impertinence. All divine consummations have perforce to be figured by us in the inapt and deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of mental man. All language expresses itself and deals with experiences of the normal man. But the yogi is not a normal man. So words have not yet been have not been invented or written down which describe these higher planes of consciousness. And he says in the Life Divine, if you remember, that the language of the Upanishads and the Vedas is precisely that they have been hammered into shape so that they can express to some extent the higher truths. So, the Gita is not doing that. That's what he's saying. The Gita stops short. Deceptive terms of a language which was made to fit the normal experience of mental man. We might also mention another thing here. That is the reason why Buddha refused to philosophize. He said that you will not understand because it's something that cannot be put into words. So, no philosophy. Be practical. You are suffering, get out of suffering, and I am giving you the solution. But don't go into philosophy.
So when Mother says to Champaklau, be simple, be happy,
Yeah,
and trust in me.
wonderful. Of course, Champaklal was that type. Okay.
Yes.
He wasn't an intellectual,
Right.
and that's why that was the path pointed out to him.
Yeah.
Okay. And so expressed in language, expressed in verbal form, they can be rightly understood only by those who already know and knowing are able to give these poor external terms a changed inner and transfigured sense. When you know what is being spoken about, when you read the words, then you recognize what is being said. As the Vedic rishis insisted in the beginning, the words of the Supreme Wisdom are expressive only to those who are already of the wise. The Gita, at its cryptic close, may seem, by its silence, to stop short of that solution for which we are seeking. So, what's the solution that we are seeking? The supramental descent and the transformation of the human race. So, Gita is not speaking about the transformation and the evolution to the next stage. That's what he's saying. It pauses at the borders of the highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light. So, which is the highest spiritual mind? The overmind. Because the spiritual mind is higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, and overmind. These are spiritual planes of consciousness. Not below, not above. These are spiritual planes. He also used the word ideal planes. Okay. But above that is the third level. It's not mind anymore. It's not spiritual. It's beyond even spiritual mind. Okay, so that's what he's saying. The highest spiritual mind and does not cross them into the splendors of the supramental light. Now he is very openly discussing the word supramental light. And yet, its secret of dynamic and not only static identity with the inner presence, its highest mystery of absolute surrender to the divine guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature, is the central secret. So what's he saying? And yet its secret of dynamic and not only static. The static condition is in the second level, the spiritual planes of consciousness. 90% of the time, it's a static that you realize. The Nirguna Brahman, the one who does not act, he is just watching. It's possible to have the cosmic consciousness there, and that is also dynamic. You have the power and you are not rejecting the physical world. But when you experience the static aspect, okay, the Nirguna, it is impersonal and you are not connected with the physical world and you don't have any power, nor are you interested in any power. You have knowledge, you have peace, you have calm, you are more than satisfied. Detachment from all the suffering and all the limitations of the world. So he is saying the Gita goes to the third level, Purushottama, where there is both dynamism as well as static condition, the personal and the impersonal aspect of the divine. Identity with the inner presence, its highest mystery of absolute surrender. To whom? The divine guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature. So this is very clearly the Purushottama or the Ishvara consciousness. Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara. So Ishvara is the third level. He is talking of that. Divine guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature. He is also the not the psychic being. This is something we can make a difference. The psychic being is the personal soul, the personal aspect, the personal soul. The divine is there as a Lord, even behind he is divine fully. So the individual aspect of the divine is more than the psychic being, but it is there in you. Like in a stone. The divine presence is there in a stone also, but there is no psychic being in the stone. It is the same with the human being. So this is the Purushottama. The inner guide, Lord and inhabitant of our nature is the central secret. Now what does he mean by absolute surrender? Very clearly he is talking about the phrase which says, give up all dharmas and lean on me alone. I will deliver you from all sin. Sarva dharman parityajya. Give up all standards of conduct. Don't depend on anything. You can go beyond morality, beyond anything, and depend on me alone. So that's the absolute surrender that he's talking about. Okay, so inhabitant of our nature is a central secret. This surrender is the indispensable means of the supramental change, and again, it is through the supramental change that the dynamic identity becomes possible. So the dynamic identity, he said that the Gita has spoken of the dynamic identity. The dynamic identity is not that possible at the second level of the spiritual planes of consciousness. Only when you go to the third level, the supramental, then dynamic change is possible.
And in this paragraph, he has used supramental 3 times.
Yes. Openly, after saying there is a hint, but now he is openly saying it.
Yes.
So the Gita does not speak of the supramental, although it goes up to the supramental plane, because he is speaking of the dynamic and the static, and also the personal and the impersonal, and he is the Lord, guide, Uttama Purusha. Okay? So, but the idea of the descent of the divine and transformation of the race, the Gita is silent. And what do you mean by the dynamic identity? Again, it's very clear. Transformation of the mind, transformation of the life, and transformation of the body also. That is what is meant by the dynamic identity becomes possible. Power aspect also is there. In the Gita does speak about living in the physical world, but the body-mind life may not be transformed. But your consciousness is lost there. Although you are living here, your consciousness is lost in the Supreme. That's possible. But the transformation of the body-mind life, no. Your consciousness is not affected by anything. The image of the lotus leaf in water never gets wet. You are in the water, you are in the physical world. But the evil, the wrong vibrations, all these things don't affect you at all. Again, there is a very beautiful image in the Gita itself. How this is possible? He says that the Gita says, just as a sea which is absolutely calm and quiet, the rivers go into it, but it is not affected. It remains absolutely calm and quiet. Exactly in the same way, the yogi also, when all these things, the desires and all these things enter into him, it makes no difference to him. He is absolutely calm and quiet, like the sea which is absorbing all the rivers coming into it without any disturbance. So, that is the description in the Gita. You are in the physical world, you are but not affected by anything. We read the next para. What then are the lines of Karma Yoga laid down by the Gita? Its key principle, its spiritual method, can be summed up as the union of two largest and highest states or powers of consciousness, equality and oneness. The two highest states are equality and oneness. We'll finish the whole para first, we'll read it. The kernel of its method is an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life as in our inner self and spirit. An inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality, accomplishes our total surrender to the divine, supports a delivery from dividing ego, which brings us oneness. But this must be a oneness in dynamic force and not only in static peace or inactive beatitude. The Gita promises us freedom for the spirit, even in the midst of works and the full energies of nature, if we accept subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limiting ego. It proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity, a largest possible action irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. So, what then are the lines of Karma Yoga laid down by the Gita? So, he's telling you very clearly two things, equality and oneness. So, what these two things are, we have to be very clear in what we mean. Its key principle, its spiritual method, can be summed up as a union of two largest and highest states or powers of consciousness, equality and samatha. So, oneness, equality and oneness. Equality is samatha. I got confused, okay. And oneness, a sense of oneness, your identity with all. Everywhere I see myself. Okay. As he says in the cosmic consciousness, I see myself in everybody with a different face. The essence is the same. You see the divine presence everywhere. Okay? So the sonnet is a beautiful sonnet, where he expresses that. He says, to whichever face I turn, I see myself with another face only. To whichever person, to whatever object or person I see, I am not using the right words, I see myself with another face. So that is the oneness. And equality? Equality means you are not disturbed at all. Neither by tragedy nor by a happy circumstance. Nothing affects you. Not even the happy circumstance. You may feel that why not be happy? Yes, I can understand suffering and evil and that you reject. But why reject happiness? No, because if you have happiness at this level, you will also have sorrow. There are dualities that go always together hand in hand. So, neither happiness nor sorrow should affect you. They come into you, but you are like the vast sea, absolutely unaffected. And equality also does not mean that you deal equally with everybody. You can't do that. You can't deal with a wise man and a thief in the same way, or a murderer. You'll be in trouble if you do that. So, your reactions to them are calm and quiet without being disturbed. You recognize difference. As he says elsewhere, you see the hues, you see the colors. Oh, this is green, that is red, this is blue, this is a man with a refined character, this is a man with a crude character. You see that, but you are not affected. It's like my teacher had given me a very interesting image, and I repeat that image. A mother has 5 children. She loves all of them equally, equal love. But one is blind, one is lame, and the other 3 are normal. Okay? Will her treatment of all of them be the same? Cannot be. But she loves all of them equally well. So that is equality. Your behavior may change, but inside you are not affected at all. She'll have to give more attention to the blind man and to the lame man, but the other 3 are okay, normal. Okay. In fact, this is a problem. Many people used to confuse. Mother used to smile a lot at people, some people, and others used to feel jealous. So, in fact, Nolnida, who is considered to be Sri Aurobindo greatest disciple, the word greatest has no meaning actually, but anyway, he has written in his diary, after he passed away, portions of the diary were read out in the playground, and he says that I was never physically close to mother. Physical closeness was by others, many others. But I was never physically close to mother. It's interesting how mother's behavior with others, we mentioned behavior also, how mother's behavior also changed. Okay, I'll tell you an interesting story, which is very, it puzzled me a lot also. But when the house, which is very near, opposite, not near the playground, but the ashram owns the whole square, which is the ashram post office, de la Font, and the corner house. That whole block we possess. It's our property, except the foyer de solda. The foyer de solda in the corner, the southwest corner is not our property. Mother had sent Amritada to negotiate and buy that property. Okay? But at that time they were asking a price which Amritada thought was not reasonable. So he came back and told mother, but mother, I did not buy it because they are asking too much. Mother was very annoyed and she used very strong words against him. Okay? And sometimes she used to be very rough with him. Okay? In fact, in front of others, she said something. This has not to be misunderstood, and I'll tell you why, then you will understand. She was very rough with him. And he was the manager of the ashram press, and he was also the managing trustee. And he used to go to mother every day with accounts, this and that. Okay? Very, very close physically. Doubtfully whether anybody else was as close as he was. Okay? But mother was very rough with him. Okay? So it used to puzzle me a lot. Okay? How can mother be so almost unkind? Then I used to work in the archives. So his diary had somehow, we had to look into his diary also. And I looked in the diary and I found a passage which completely explained this phenomena. Okay? He is saying that my outer nature is imperfect. And I want mother to be very strict with me. Let her be Mother Durga and destroy everything in me that is imperfect. He is himself writing. Okay? This is what he wanted, mother is doing. Now you can understand See, we should never judge things by their surface reactions. There's always a deep reason for that. So this was marvelous. And there's a very interesting episode also exactly for this. Okay. And the episode goes like this. He went to mother and mother scolded him. As usual. She used to be rough with him. And he is coming down the staircase, meditation hall staircase, and saying, I'll never go to her again. I'll never go to her again. I'll never go to her again. And from there below, I think it was Nolita who said, Amrita, mother is calling you. And he immediately rushes up again. Look at the difference between the outer nature and the inner nature. Isn't it beautiful?
Beautiful. Great. I didn't know that story.
So, this is equality, inner equality. The outer equality, even he could not manage. Okay? So, outer equality is not easy and it should not be judged. But inside, you are absolutely calm and quiet. Now, he is telling you what the equality is. The kernel of its method is an unreserved acceptance of the divine in our life. Okay, in all our actions, physical life, as in our inner self and spirit. So not only you are calm inside, but you are calm also outside, which Amrita could not do for a short while. Okay, so an inner renunciation of personal desire. So now he is telling you how it comes. Okay, but there is one thing interesting you should see here. It is the inner being that changes first, not the outer being. The outer being is very difficult to change because it's a crust. It's a crust, it is hard and fixed. It doesn't change easily. So that change of the crust can only be done by the supermind. That's what Samdeva is saying again and again. The mind may change. The mind can be full of light. And if you are a really advanced yogi, even your vital will be changed, but not the body. Okay? So the inner changes first. Then the inner change throws out its influence into the body-mind life, and that also slowly changes. In Sri Aurobindo's case, the color of the body had changed completely. Many other changes also were there. But the transformation from a biological body to a supramental body did not take place. But he wants that also. And that will happen one day. An inner renunciation of personal desire leads to equality. If you have no personal desire, naturally you don't expect anything and you are absolutely calm. Whatever comes, you accept calmly and peacefully. Accomplishes our total surrender to the divine, supports a delivery from dividing ego. You are rid of the dividing ego, which brings us oneness. You note the word dividing ego. The ego is not to be interpreted in any other way, but that it is the ego which makes you feel separate from everybody else and everything else. I am this, I am not the computer, I am not Narad, I am not Gita, I am not. That is the ego. But when the ego disappears, everybody is the same. The consciousness is there and the consciousness is essentially the same. Its form is different, but essentially same. That is the oneness that he's talking about. An inner renunciation of personal desire keeps to equality, accomplishes our total surrender to the divine, supports a delivery from dividing ego, which brings us oneness. So that oneness is the abolition of the separateness. I feel myself separate, that disappears. Okay? But this is a oneness in dynamic force and not only in static peace or inactive beatitude. I just passively see myself everywhere, but I don't have any power. It's not like that. You must have power also to change circumstances in the physical world. That's what it means. Dynamic. It should be a oneness in dynamic force and not only in static peace. 90% of the time when you have the experience of the self, the Brahman consciousness, it is static. You are not any, you are only a witness. You are watching calmly, quietly. You are in peace. But Srivanda wants you to have the power also to change things in the body, mind, life, and the world. The Gita promises us freedom for the spirit. Now note that. The Gita promises you freedom for the spirit. The inner being will be changed. Not necessarily the outer, which is not being spoken about. Okay. The outer would be changed only by the supernatural force. So the Gita promises us freedom for the spirit, even in the midst of works and the full energies of nature. But this can be done only if we accept subjection of our whole being to that which is higher than the separating and limiting ego. Again, he is defining ego. It separates you and limits you. So that separation goes away, limitation goes away, you feel everywhere the oneness, the divine presence everywhere. It proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on still passivity. Inner being, you are absolutely calm, and with your body, mind, life, you are engaged in work. That's a Karma Yoga. You are not disturbed by anything that happens in the physical world. Okay? It proposes an integral dynamic activity founded on a still passivity. A largest possible action irrevocably based on an immobile calm is its secret. Free expression out of a supreme inward silence. Inwardly you are absolutely unaffected, but in the physical world you are doing all the works, and your work is likely to be more perfect than anybody else's because you are absolutely calm and quiet. It's a well-known fact that if I am disturbed, I'll make mistakes. Okay. But if I am not disturbed, okay, then my work will be more logical, more systematic, will be more effective. That's why people recognize this in a very superficial manner. If someone is angry, they say, calm down, calm down. You tell people to calm down. This is the truth at its lowest, at its most superficial aspect. When you are disturbed, you are not going to act in the right way, your judgment will be wrong. All things here are the one and indivisible, eternal, transcendent, and cosmic Brahman that is in its seeming divided in things and creatures. In seeming only, for in truth it is always one and equal in all things and creatures, and the division is only a phenomenon of the surface. As long as we live in the ignorant seeming, we are the ego and are subject to the modes of nature. Modes of nature, sattva, rajas, tamas. Enslaved to appearances, bound to the dualities, tossed between good and evil, sin and virtue, grief and joy, pain and pleasure, good fortune and ill fortune, success and failure, we follow helplessly the iron or gilt and iron round of the wheel of Maya. At best, we have only the poor relative freedom, which by us is ignorantly called free will. But that is at bottom illusory, since it is the modes of nature that express themselves through our personal will. It is force of nature, grasping us, ungrasped by us, that determines what we shall will, how we shall will it. Nature, not an independent ego, chooses what object we shall seek, whether by reasoned will or unreflecting impulse, at any moment of our existence. If, on the contrary, we live in the unifying reality of the Brahman, then we go beyond the ego and overstep nature. For then we get back to our true self and become the spirit. In the spirit, we are above the impulsion of nature, superior to her, superior to her modes and forces. Attaining to the perfect equality in the soul, mind and heart, we realize our true self of oneness, one with all beings, one too with that which expresses itself in them and in all that we see and experience. This equality and this oneness are the indispensable twin foundation we must lay down for a divine being, a divine consciousness, a divine action. Not one with all, we are not spiritual, not divine. Not equal souled to all things, happenings and creatures, we cannot see spiritually, cannot know divinely, cannot feel divinely towards others. The supreme power, the one eternal and infinite, is equal to all things and to all beings. And because it is equal, it can act with an absolute wisdom according to the truth of its works and its force, and according to the truth of each thing and of every creature. He has explained beautifully, and we can go into many explanations and also give examples of what he has said elsewhere. He has given many interesting things. See, what he's saying, that the truth is, he's saying when he was an 11-year-old, he wrote a poem. And in that poem, he's saying, he modeled the poem outwardly in the form of the poem The Cloud, which Shelley had written. Inner rhymes and all that. He has followed that. But he is saying in that poem that the sun shines equally to all on the palace and the poor hut. Something like that. So the idea of samatha is already there in him when he's 11-year-old writing that poem. So that's what we'll see here. Next time we'll see this. Very interesting.
Thank you, Ram. Namaste all.